Hello everyone, so this is the Target NEET PG 2022 Anatomy Session 3, which is targeted for the NEET PG 2022 session. So my dear aspirants, before starting the session, I would like to tell you about myself Dr. Mona Lisa, MD Anatomy from Armed Force Medical College, Pune. Okay. So yes, now I would also like to tell you about the special class features which is absolutely free on the Unacademy platform. So it's an interactive session where the learners and the educators can interact. The learners can ask live their doubts and it can be cleared in the session itself. Polls are conducted for the learners and the learners can know where they are lying and what is their weak areas and needs to be revised before the examination. Raise your hands and get your doubts clear. Never ever miss a session. So what happens when you start seeing the session of an educator and you want to follow them? If you are going to follow the educator, then you will get notification regarding all the free sessions and also the sessions on the Plus platform. So you are not going to miss any of the session of that educator. So this is the great beneficial part. So you can just grab that opportunity, and once the session is completed, you can also download the lecture notes and the PDF notes. So this is another benefit which can be acquired by you. So once the session is completed, you should download the PDF notes anywhere, anytime, read from top educators of Unacademy platform. I would also like to tell you about the benefits of Plus course. So here all 19 subjects are covered up in a very systematic way. So all 19 subjects can be assessed live and recorded version. You can study from India's top educators in the medical field, compete in live tests and quizzes, test your preparation with highly competitive quizzes, study on the device of your choice, and more than 25,000 MCQs are there. So there are 25,000 MCQs which are clinical MCQs of all 19 subjects which can be targeted in a very systematic way with 1 year of subscription and more. If you are going to take 1 year of subscription and more, what will happen? You can also get the printed notes of the Plus subscription of Unacademy. So these are the benefits which can be acquired by you. When I am talking about iconic subscription, my dear aspirants, so it's not only the benefit of Unacademy but also the benefit of Prep Ladder. So both this can be grabbed by you. Clinical integrated essentials, video lectures from Dream Team, QBank 3 can be assessed, rapid revision snapshot, treasure dream notes of 2021. So all these benefits of the Prep Ladder is added on along with the benefits of Unacademy. So you can grab this opportunity of taking the Plus subscription if you want to take the Plus subscription, or you want to take the iconic subscription for enhancing your preparation and getting a better rank in the entrance exam. You can just use my code ANAT10 to avail an opportunity of 10% discount. So above all the discount which is offered by the Unacademy platform, you can get an additional discount of 10% by using this code. So okay, let's start with the session now. All the best. So I will target today 20 MCQs and you can mark your answers in the messages. So let's start with the first MCQ. Okay, artery not supplying the causal back plexus. So which of the following artery is not supplying the causal back plexus? So your time starts now. Mark the correct answer. Artery not supplying causal back plexus is anterior ethmoidal artery, greater palatine artery, sphenopalatine artery, ascending pharyngeal artery. Question number 1. Artery which is not giving blood supply and not contributing to the formation of causal back plexus. Your time starts now. You will get 15 seconds to mark the correct answer. 4 options are there, my dear aspirants. Which is the correct one? So I will just wait for 15 seconds for your answer and then I will come up with the explanation. Not supplying causal back plexus, artery not supplying causal back plexus, which is the correct one? My dear aspirants, among the options provided, it is the ascending pharyngeal artery. The correct answer is ascending pharyngeal artery. Now why ascending pharyngeal artery is the correct answer? Because it is not giving any kind of blood supply to the nose or the nasal septum, or the actually causal back plexus is the plex of the blood vessels. Arteries is anastomosing on the antero-inferior part of the nasal septum, and major branches of external carotid artery with the branch of internal carotid artery is forming the plex, which is located in the little's area of the nose, that is called as causal back plexus. Here ascending pharyngeal artery is not contributing. It will be more clear once I show you this diagram. So my dear aspirants, I am just encircling the area of causal back area, and what you can see, the important arteries which is contributing here are anterior ethmoidal artery is contributing to form, septal branch of superior labile artery, greater palatine artery, and that of sphenopalatine artery. So these are the 4 arteries which is the contribution. Okay, branches of posterior ethmoidal artery is also giving blood supply to nasal septum, but it is not forming an anastomotic network in the Little's area of the nasal septum, in the Little's area of the nasal septum. Got it? So let's talk about its important branches. Okay, anterior ethmoidal artery is a branch of ophthalmic artery, and ophthalmic artery is a branch of internal carotid artery. Septal branches of superior labile artery. Superior labile artery is a branch of facial artery. Facial artery is a branch of external carotid artery. Greater palatine artery is a branch of maxillary artery, and maxillary artery is a branch of external carotid artery. Sphenopalatine artery is a branch of maxillary artery third part, maxillary artery third part, and sphenopalatine artery is ultimately becomes a branch of external carotid artery, because maxillary artery is again a branch of external carotid artery. So by this explanation it is quite clear that one of the branch from internal carotid artery source and all other branches of the external carotid artery is contributing in the formation of this Kesselbach area. So here we can clearly see ascending pharyngeal artery is not contributing. So that is the correct answer. So D is the correct answer. Let's move on to the next, that is question number 2. Okay. Muscle inserting onto the medial aspect of the scapula. Which of the following muscle? We have got 4 options. Which of the following muscle is inserting onto the medial aspect of the scapula? 4 options are subscapularis, serratus anterior, teres minor and latissimus dorsi. Muscle inserting, muscles are which are inserting on the medial aspect of the scapula: subscapularis, serratus anterior, teres minor and latissimus dorsi. So which is the correct answer? Question number 2. 4 options are there. Okay. So the correct answer is serratus anterior. The correct answer is serratus anterior. The correct answer is serratus anterior. Muscles inserting onto the medial aspect of scapula, serratus anterior is the correct answer. So let's see here. So when you are seeing here, what you can see, this is the origin of serratus anterior muscle, and the origin of serratus anterior muscle is occurring from the upper 8 and 9 ribs. It originates from upper 8 and 9 ribs, as you can see here, serratus anterior muscle. Upper 8 and 9 ribs is the origin. Okay, and from here what you can see that it is inserting. Where is the insertion? So it is inserting onto the medial border of scapula. It is inserting onto the medial border of scapula, and this was the MCQ which has been asked, that which of the following muscle is inserting onto the medial aspect of the scapula. So we have got serratus anterior as the correct answer. So this is the reason serratus anterior is the correct answer. Now let's talk about the other options which is provided. One of the option was subscapularis muscle. Subscapularis muscle is not the right answer to be inserted onto the medial border of scapula. The reason is that the muscle is arising from the subscapular fossa and ultimately inserting onto the lesser tubercle of humerus. So if I talk about origin and insertion of subscapularis muscle, it is originating from subscapular fossa and inserting onto the lesser tubercle of humerus. So subscapularis is the muscle not inserting onto the medial border of scapula. Now another option which was there was the latissimus dorsi muscle. So see here, this large broad muscle having a greater area of origin from iliac crest and the thoracolumbar fascia, and also from T7 to L5 vertebrae, and it is inserting. You can see it is having a very narrow insertion point. It is inserting into the bicipital groove. So origin from inferior angle of scapula, thoracolumbar aponeurosis and that of iliac crest. A wide origin and insertion into the bicipital groove, that is the floor of the bicipital groove. This is the lady lying between the two major, that is pectoralis major and teres major. So it is quite clear that the only one muscle which was provided in the option, that is serratus anterior. So here we have got serratus anterior as the correct answer. So yes, actually why teres minor is not the correct answer? Because teres minor is also the muscle which is, we have one of the muscle of the rotator cuff. It is also originating. If we talk about the teres minor muscle, it is also originating from the scapula lateral aspect, so it is also not the correct answer. So yes, let's move on to the next, that is question number 3rd. Which of the following is not intracapsular? So you will again be provided with 15 seconds to 30 seconds, mark the correct answer. Whether it is coracoid fossa, whether it is radial fossa, whether it is olecranon fossa or lateral epicondyle. 4 options are there, mark the correct answer. Which of the following is not intracapsular? Coronoid fossa, radial fossa, olecranon fossa or lateral epicondyle. 4 options are there, my dear aspirants, mark the correct answer. So your time starts now, and the correct answer here is lateral epicondyle. Actually both the epicondyles, that is lateral, both lateral and epicondyle, both lateral and medial epicondyle, both lateral and medial epicondyles, both lateral and medial epicondyles are lying outside the attachment of, is located outside the attachment of fibrous capsule. Got it? It is lying outside the attachment of fibrous capsule. So we have got D as the correct answer. Which of the following is not intracapsular? D is the correct answer. Okay. So yes. Now let's move on to the next, that is, so before that I would also like to show you the attachment of fibrous capsule with the green color. So this is a diagram where you can appreciate the attachment of the fibrous capsule of elbow joint, and the fibrous capsule of elbow joint attachment has been marked with green color. Okay. Now see here, the attachment is, so what you can appreciate, the attachment here you can clearly see that both, if I talk about both lateral epicondyle and that of medial epicondyle, you can see here it is lying outside the green color line because it is lying outside the attachment of elbow joint fibrous capsule. Fibrous capsule of the elbow joint is marked with green color. So which all area it is enclosing? It is enclosing capitulum, radial fossa, trochlear fossa. It is also enclosing olecranon fossa, and you can see here how it encloses all the important structures here, the olecranon fossa, the radial fossa, the trochlear fossa, the capitulum, but it is not enclosing actually both the lateral and medial epicondyle. Both the lateral and medial epicondyle is lying outside the attachment of fibrous capsule. So here we have got D as the correct answer. So let's move on to the next, that is question number 4th. Structure that lies lateral to, structure which is located lateral to the distal radial tubercle. Which of the following structure is lying lateral to distal radial tubercle? Your time starts now, mark the correct answer. We have got 4 options. So again you will be provided with 15 to 30 seconds to mark the correct answer. The options are extensor pollicis longus, extensor carpi radialis longus, brachioradialis, extensor carpi ulnaris. So among this option you have to tell me the correct answer. Lateral to distal radial tubercle. What is the other name of distal radial tubercle? So this is the landmark which has to be known to you. Distal radial tubercle. So distal radial tubercle. What is the other name of distal radial tubercle? It is also called as Lister's tubercle. It is also called as Lister's tubercle. Distal radial tubercle is also called as Lister tubercle. Okay, and the structure which is lying lateral to Lister's tubercle or distal radial tubercle is extensor carpi radialis longus. Actually, if I want to explain this answer, I would use a word that is if you know the structures passing through the 6 extensor compartment. It is also important that you should know the structure passing through all the 6 extensor compartment. So this Lister tubercle or the distal radial tubercle, which is lying on the dorsal aspect of the lower end of the radius, it is forming a separation. It is forming a separation for 2 important extensor compartment, that is 2nd and 3rd. So we know that through the 3rd compartment extensor pollicis longus goes, and through the 2nd compartment ECRL and ECRB, that is extensor carpi radialis longus and extensor carpi radialis brevis is traversing. So lateral to distal radial tubercle, the structures lying will be extensor carpi radialis longus. Okay, so B is the correct answer. Here I want to show you the Lister tubercle or the Lister tubercle or the dorsal tubercle. So if I highlight also, you can see here, this is the tubercle, and this is the raised edge which you are seeing, this is the tubercle, and this is separating the second and the third extensor compartment structure. So second extensor compartment structure will lie lateral to it. Actually, it is important that you should know the structures passing through each of the extensor compartment. So that is also an important point. So all of you please write down extensor compartment. So extensor compartment 1, the structures passing through extensor compartment 1 is abductor pollicis longus and extensor pollicis brevis. Through the second compartment, ECRL and ECRB, that is extensor carpi radialis longus and extensor carpi radialis brevis. Through the third compartment, it is EPL, extensor pollicis longus. Through the fourth compartment, the structures passing is extensor digitorum, extensor indicis, posterior interosseous nerve and anterior interosseous artery. The structures traversing from the fifth and the sixth compartment. So the structures traversing through fifth compartment is extensor digiti minimi, and sixth compartment extensor carpi unlaris. So these are the structures, that is extensor compartment, these are the structures which is passing through the extensor compartment. These are the structures which is passing through the extensor compartment. Okay, these are the 6 compartment and these are the structures which is passing through the extensor compartment as mentioned here. Okay, got it? So yes, my dear aspirant, let's move on to the next, that is 5th MCQ. Okay, weight transmission from the upper limb to axial skeleton is done by all of the following except weight transmission from the upper limb, that is appendicular skeleton, to that of axial skeleton is done by which of the following ligament, whether it is costoclavicular ligament, whether it is coracoclavicular ligament, whether it is coracoacromial ligament, interclavicular ligament. So we have got 4 options and you have to mark the correct answer. Question number 5th. Weight transmission from upper limb to axial skeleton is done by which of the following? 4 options are there. Your time begins now. Mark the correct answer. 15 seconds will be provided to you. So most important ligament. So my dear aspirants, here the correct answer among the option provided A, B, C and D is the coracoclavicular ligament, that is the option B is the correct answer. The correct answer for question number B, question number 5th is coracoclavicular ligament. I would like to show you a diagram for it so that your concepts is cleared. So as you can see this diagram, if I slightly highlight this, okay, what you can see, this is the direction from the weight transmission direction from that of the upper limb, starting from the hand, then going towards the radius and going towards the ulna through. What is the direction? So it is traversing through the ulna. So let me more highlight it. Okay, this is the arrow mark. Then from radius, what you can see, it is traversing through interosseous membrane to ulna, going via humero-ulnar joint, traverses towards the humerus, and then it will reach the scapula. So what you can see, the connection of the scapula and that of the clavicle here is by coracoclavicular ligament. Coracoclavicular ligament. So this is a most important ligament here. Coracoclavicular ligament is most important ligament for weight transmission. It is the most important ligament which is transmitting the weight from the appendicular skeleton to the axial skeleton, Got it? Okay. So yeah, now this is how the weight transmission occurs thereafter via costoclavicular ligament and towards the sternoclavicular joint and that of the axial skeleton. So among the option provided, we will go with option B as the correct answer. Got it, everyone? Yes. So let's move on to the next, that is question number 20th. All are true statement about brachial plexus except. All of the following statement are true about brachial plexus except. Lower trunk is formed by root of C8 and T1. Lateral cord is formed by upper and middle trunk. Posterior cord is formed by posterior division of all the three trunks. C4 root is post fixed. 4 options are there for question number 6. You have to mark the correct answer. All of the following are true about brachial plexus except. So yes, you will get 15 seconds. Mark the correct answer. Your time begins now. My dear aspirants, lower trunk is formed by C8 and T1 is absolutely correct. Yes, lateral cord is formed by taking the contribution of anterior division of upper and middle trunk. So this is also correct. And yes, we definitely know that posterior cord is formed by posterior division of all the three trunks. So the incorrect option is C4 root is post fixed duplex. Actually, it should be prefixed. It should be prefixed. So generally the ventral, so how is the brachial plex formed? Ventral plex is formed by ventral rami of C5, C6, C7, C8 and T1. So this is how the brachial plex is formed. C5, C6, C7 and T1. Now, when the brachial plex is taking contribution from C4, then it is called as prefixed. When it is taking contribution from T2, then it is called as post-fixed. So let me give you, show you a diagram that your formation of brachial plexus will be clear. So see here, in this diagram we are seeing the roots of brachial plexus, we are seeing the trunk, cords and the branches, important branches. So here you can clearly see C5, C6, C7, C8 and T1. Okay, so these are actually ventral rami of C5, C6, C7, C8 and T1. These are together forming the roots of brachial plexus. Now, my dear aspirants, here C5 and C6 will join to form the superior or upper trunk. C7 itself will form middle trunk and C8 and T1 will join to form the inferior trunk. So, see here, superior, middle and that of inferior trunk is formed as shown in the diagram. C5, C6 joins to form the superior, C7 along the middle and C8 and T1 is forming the inferior trunk. Now, each of these trunk will divide into anterior and posterior division. So, here yellow color has been used for posterior division. So, here yellow color. So, this is P, this is also P and this is also P. I am using also yellow color. So, P, P and P. That means posterior division of all the three trunks will form the posterior cord of brachial plexus. This will lead to the formation of posterior cord of brachial plexus. Okay. And here you can see here black color is A and A. Anterior division, see here, anterior division of superior and the middle trunk will lead to formation of lateral cord and anterior division of inferior or lower trunk will lead to the formation of medial cord. So, this is how the cords are formed. So, this is the lateral cord which is formed by anterior division of superior and middle trunk. Medial cord is formed by anterior division of inferior trunk. So, now these three important cords of brachial plexus is formed, and what is important for you to know is the branches of each of the cords of brachial plexus and important branches of the root. So, so that we have done in the brachial plex class also. If you want, I will just tell you in brief. So, branches from the roots, two important branches are from the root, long thoracic nerve and that of dorsal scapular nerve. Trunk, only superior trunk is giving the branches and superior trunk is providing two important branches. One is SS suprascapular and another is NS, that is nerve to subscapularis. If I talk about the branches from lateral cord, it is ML2. What do you mean by ML2? It is musculocutaneous nerve, lateral root of median nerve and lateral pectoral nerve. Posterior division, rats in the upper and the lower self. R for radial nerve, A for axillary, T for thoracodorsal, S for subscapular, upper and lower. Medial cord, M for you, me for you, M for you. 4M, U stand for ulnar nerve and the M stands for medial cutaneous nerve of arm and medial cutaneous nerve of forearm, medial pectoral nerve and medial root of median nerve. So just in brief, I have told you all the branches of the course of brachial plexus and how the course, the divisions and the trunks and the roots of brachial plexus is formed. So it is quite clear that C4 root is not contributing generally in the formation of brachial plexus, but if it contributes, it is called as prefixed, and if T2 is involved, it is called as postfixed brachial plexus. So let's move on to the next. Wrong statement about Erb's palsy. Which of the following is a wrong statement about Erb's palsy? Loss of abduction at the shoulder joint, loss of lateral rotation, loss of pronation at radioulnar joint and loss of flexion at the elbow joint. So 4 options are there and you have to pick the wrong statement about Erb's palsy. 4 options are there: loss of abduction at the shoulder joint, loss of lateral rotation, loss of pronation of radioulnar joint and loss of flexion at elbow joint. So which of the following is not true about Erb's palsy? Means it is not involved in upper trunk palsy. So the correct answer is C, loss of pronation of radioulnar joint. Actually, what do you mean by Erb's palsy? Erb's palsy means it's an upper trunk brachial plex palsy and it involves C5 and C6 nerve root. Okay. Now, the presentation of the patient if it is involved is called as Vater tip deformity. See here, this is the deformity which is seen in this, it can be either due to birth injury or it can be either after sustaining injury. So, the injury presentation is called as Vater tip deformity or policeman tip deformity. So, my dear aspirants, here the presentation. So, here if you will see, this is the arm of the baby and this is the forearm of the baby involved. So, the presentation is the arm of the baby will be adducted and medially rotated. Now, if you will see the forearm of the baby, what you can see, the affected Erb's palsy patient will be having forearm pronated and extended. So, here the forearm is pronated, so it will not be lost. So, in this it will not be lost, it is affected, so it not will be lost. So, this is the Vater tip deformity or policeman tip deformity, which is the presentation of the patient with the involvement of upper trunk palsy. So, got it everyone? Got it? Okay, so let's move on to the next, that is we will move on with the next MCQ, that is question number 8. Which of the following is not seen in lower radial nerve injury? Which of the following is not seen in lower radial nerve injury? So, again there are following option: weakness of brachioradialis, okay, inability to extend the finger, paralysis of extensor carpi radialis brevis, or loss of sensation over the dorsum of the hand. So, yes, this is all. So, mark your correct answer. Which of the following is not seen in lower radial nerve injury? A, B, C, D. So, your time starts now, mark the correct answer. My dear aspirant, the correct answer is A, weakness of brachioradialis. My dear aspirants, here the injury level is at lower radial nerve injury and the innervation to brachioradialis is given after the nerve is traversing from the spiral groove. So, it is in the above level. So, it will be escaping the injury of lower radial nerve injury. Rest all presentation will be seen in the patient. This will be not involved, brachioradialis muscle is not involved. Inability to extend of the finger is involved. Paralysis of extensor carpi radialis brevis is also involved because firstly it gives innervation to brachioradialis and then to extensor carpi radialis brevis. So if we have to choose one, we will go with A as the correct answer. Loss of sensation of dorsum of the hand is also seen, but there is there is not any involvement or paralysis of brachioradialis muscle because it is already given when the radial nerve traverses from the spiral groove. After being traversing from the spiral groove, direct branch is given to brachioradialis by the radial nerve. So yes, let's move on to the next, that is question number 9. Nerve supply of supinator muscle is similar to which of the following? Again, you will be provided with 15 seconds. Whether it is brachialis muscle, whether it is brachioradialis, whether it is extensor digitorum or pronator quadratus muscle. Question number 9, 4 options are there. You have to mark the correct answer. Nerve supply or to the supinator muscle is similar to which of the following? Nerve supply to the supinator muscle is similar to which of the following? Brachialis, brachioradialis, extensor digitorum, pronator quadratus. So yes, now I will come up with the explanation. So supinator muscle, the first thing is, what is the nerve supply of supinator muscle? The nerve supply of supinator muscle is by posterior introosseous nerve, is by posterior introosseous nerve. The nerve supply is by posterior introosseous nerve, that is supinator muscle. Okay. Now, posterior introosseous nerve is a deep branch of radial nerve. Now, I would like to write the nerve supply of all the muscles which is provided. So, the options which is provided here is, the one of the option is brachialis. So, brachialis, what is the nerve supply? It is an example of composite or hybrid muscle, and the nerve supply of brachialis is by musculocutaneous nerve and the radial nerve. So, it is an example of hybrid muscle. So, this was A option. What about the B option? Brachioradialis. Brachioradialis. What is the nerve supply of brachioradialis? It is directly getting innervation from radial nerve. What is the nerve supply of extensor digitorum? So, our extensor digitorum, actually all the muscles of extensor compartment is getting innervation from deep branch of radial nerve, that is spin nerve, posterior introosseous nerve, which is the innervation for supinator muscle. This is the innervation for supinator muscle, and what we can see here also, extensor digitorum is also getting innervation from is getting innervation similar to that of supinator muscle, that is from the posterior introosseous nerve. So, C is the correct answer. What about pronator quadratus, my dear aspirants, when we are talking about pronator quadratus? So, when we are talking about pronator quadratus, it is getting innervation from which nerve? The answer is, it is getting innervation from median nerve branch, that is anterior introosseous nerve, deep branch of median nerve, that is anterior introosseous nerve. So, the correct answer, and the muscle which is getting similar nerve supply, that similar to that of supinator muscle, the correct answer is extensor digitorum. So, C is the correct answer, question number 9. So, got it? Both of these muscles are getting innervation from pin nerve, and pin is posterior introosseous nerve, deep branch of radial nerve. So, we have got the correct answer. Now, let's move on to the next, that is question number 10. All the best, dear aspirants. Which of the following joint is paired correctly with the type? Correctly with the type. Which of the following joint is paired correctly with the type? A. Proximal and distal radioulnar joint is condyloid synovial joint. Radiocarpal joint is pivot type of synovial joint. Intercarpal joint is plain synovial joint. Metacarpophalangeal joint is an example of hinge synovial joint. Interphalangeal joint is an example of condyloid synovial joint. So, question number 10, 5 options are there. Mark the correct answer. Which of the following joint is paired correctly with the type? So yes, you will be provided with 15 seconds. Mark the correct answer. Your time begins now. Which is the correct pairing, means type of joint is correctly labeled here. So let me mark the correct answer and I am going to explain each of the options. So let me mark the correct answer. The correct answer is, we are got C as the correct answer, that is intercarpal joint is plain synovial joint. Intercarpal joint is an example of plain synovial joint. Now my dear aspirants, why intercarpal joint is an example of plain synovial joint? It is having a gliding movement and this is the true match the following which is provided. So we have got C as the correct answer. What about the other option? I will also come up with the other options. So I have already written also. So here let me talk. Okay, when we are talking about the proximal and distal radio-ulnar joint, what is the type? When we are talking about proximal and distal radio-ulnar joint, it is pivot type of synovial joint. So this is the wrong one. Radiocarpal joint is not pivot synovial joint, but it is an example of radiocarpal joint, means wrist joint. It is an example of ellipsoid synovial joint. Metacarpophalangeal joint. Metacarpophalangeal joint. When we are talking about metacarpophalangeal joint, it is again an example of hinge joint, is absolutely wrong. It is also an example of ellipsoid joint. Actually, ellipsoid joint, in some book it is also written condyloid joint, so that is also correct, but functionally it is ellipsoid, structurally condyloid joint. Interphalangeal joint is not condyloid joint. Interphalangeal joint is an example of hinge synovial joint. Hinge synovial joint. So here the correct match the following is C. Intercarpal joint is an example of plain type of synovial joint. So let me show you this here. So see here, the proximal and distal radio-ulnar joint. What I have told you, both the proximal and distal means superior and inferior articulation between the radio-ulnar joint becomes an example of pivot type of synovial joint. Now, radiocarpal joint is called as wrist joint. We know that wrist joint is not taking contribution from the articulation of ulna. It's just the radius bone and the carpal bones, mainly scaphoid and lunate. Mainly scaphoid and lunate is participating in formation of wrist joint, and as I told you, it's an example of ellipsoid joint. But I told you, so please don't get confused with this condyloid word. Actually, structurally it will be a condyloid joint, but functionally it is an example of ellipsoid joint. So ellipsoid joint is correct. Condyloid joint is structural, but functional function के according अगर हम mark करेंगे तो it is the correct answer will be ellipsoid joint. So the correct answer will be ellipsoid joint. The correct answer will be ellipsoid joint. Okay. Intercarpal joint is an example of plain type of synovial joint. Metacarpophalangeal joint is an example of condyloid type of synovial joint. Metacarpal, so it is again structurally a condyloid joint. So structurally it will be a condyloid joint. Structurally again it will be a condyloid joint, but functionally it will be again ellipsoid type of joint, ellipsoid joint. Interphalangeal joint is an example of hinge joint, so that is correct. Yes, interphalangeal joint is an example of hinge joint, so that is also correct. So yes, by this explanation it is quite clear that only one option was correct, that is intercarpal joint is an example of plain type of synovial joint. So this was the correct option, all other pairing was incorrect, so we have chosen C as the correct answer. So yes, my dear aspirants, let's move on to the next, that is question number 11. All the best for this, all the best. True statement regarding rotator cuff injury. True statement regarding rotator cuff injury. Injury or disease may damage rotator cuff, causing instability of acromioclavicular joint. Injury or disease may damage rotator cuff and will cause instability of acromioclavicular joint. Supraspinatus tendon is most commonly torn part of rotator cuff. Teres major muscle take longest time to rehabilitate of rotator cuff muscle. Injury occur when the muscles pull away from their origin on the acromion. Process acute tears are common in young person. So we have got 5 options here for question number 11th, and you have to choose the right answer. What is the true statement regarding rotator cuff injury? Okay. So take your 15 seconds and mark the correct answer. So this is the MCQ regarding rotator cuff injury. Okay. So you will be provided 15 seconds. So the correct answer here is, my dear aspirants, the correct answer here is supraspinatus tendon is most commonly torn part. Actually, supraspinatus muscle. So first thing is that you should know which all muscle forms rotator cuff. Rotator cuff muscles. The mnemonic is sits. Okay. So the mnemonic is sits. So here S stands for supraspinatus, N stands for infraspinatus, T stands for teres minor, and another S stands for subscapularis. Okay. So these are the 4 muscles which is mentioned here: supraspinatus, infraspinatus, teres minor, and subscapularis muscle. These are the together 4 muscles which is the rotator cuff muscle. This is the together 4 muscle which is together called as rotator cuff muscle. And if I take the contributions, true statement regarding rotator cuff injury, it's the supraspinatus tendon which is the most commonly torn part of rotator cuff. So yes, supraspinatus muscle tendon is most commonly torn part of rotator cuff injury. So yes, absolutely B is the correct answer. Yeah, because it's one of the muscle of rotator cuff and it is commonly injured. So yes, injury or disease of rotator cuff is not going to involve acromioclavicular joint. So this is not correct. It is not transmitting to acromial clavicular joint. Teres major part a muscle take longest time to rehabilitate. This is also wrong. Why? Teres major muscle is not an example of rotator cuff muscle. Injury occur when the muscles pull away from their origin on acromion. So acromion process, acromioclavicular joint is also not involved. Acute tears are common in young individuals is wrong. It is involved in old individual or elderly person. So we have got only B option correct. So yes, see here, injury or disease may damage the rotator cuff, and when the injury and disease is damaging the rotator cuff involvement, there will be instability of glenohumeral joint or shoulder joint, not the involvement. There is not involvement of acromioclavicular joint, there will be involvement of glenohumeral joint. There will be involvement of glenohumeral joint or not that of acromioclavicular joint. Now, supraspinatus muscle, actually it is one of the muscle of the rotator cuff, and this is most commonly injured muscle tendon, supraspinatus. When we are talking of acute tear, when we are talking of acute involvement or acute tear, it is uncommon in young person, but it is common in elderly person. It is common in elderly person, not in the young person. So clearly we got B as the correct answer. Let's move on to the next, that is question number 12th. All the best, dear aspirants. Okay, which is true in respect to palmaris brevis muscle? So we have got 5 options and you have to tell me which of the following is a true statement in respect to palmaris brevis muscle. Palmaris brevis muscle adds palmar longus in tightening the palmar aponeurosis. Palmaris brevis, which is true in respect to palmaris brevis, adds palmaris longus in tightening the palmar aponeurosis. A. Innervated by median nerve. C is in hypothenar component, covers and protects the radial artery, wrinkles the skin of hypothenar eminences and deepening the hollow of the palm. 5 options are there and you have to mark the correct answer. True statement regarding palmaris brevis muscle. Your time starts now. Mark the correct answer. 15 seconds will be provided to you. Okay. So the correct answer here is, my dear aspirants, the most correct statement about the palmaris brevis muscle, which is a muscle in the subcutaneous fascia. So palmaris brevis muscle is the muscle which is lying in the superficial fascia. So this is an example of which kind of muscle? This is an example of panniculus carnosus muscle. Panniculus carnosus muscle. The other list of panniculus carnosus muscle is Darto's muscle. Okay, muscles of the face, platysma, all these are example of panniculus carnosus muscle. Cutis ani muscle, Darto's muscle of the scrotum. So the most correct statement about its action is wrinkling the skin of hypothenar eminences and deepening the hollow of the palm. So E is the correct statement. Adds palmar longus in tightening palmar. This is wrong. Palmar longus is not involved in tightening palmar aponeurosis. Innervated by median nerve is absolutely wrong. It is innervated by ulnar nerve. It's a muscle of hypothenar compartment is absolutely wrong. Only 3 muscles are belonging to hypothenar compartment: abductor digiti minimi, flexor digiti minimi, opponens digiti minimi, not the palmar brevis. It's a muscle which is lying in superficial fascia. It's lying on the medial aspect of the palm, and it's an example of panniculus carnosus muscle. Covers and protects radial artery. No, it is lying on the medial side, so it will be lying in close relation to ulnar artery, not the radial artery. So let's see the further explanation of palmaris brevis muscle. Now, all the information regarding palmaris brevis muscle. See here, palmaris brevis muscle, if I talk about its nerve supply, palmaris brevis muscle is innervated by ulnar nerve. Please note down, its innervation is by ulnar nerve, not the median nerve. The other example is skinning. It wrinkles the skin of hypothenar eminences and also deepens the hollow of the palm. So, what is its function? This criteria or this function will assist in palmar grip, forming palmar grip. The other important information is that it will cover and protect ulnar artery. It will cover and protect the ulnar artery and the ulnar nerve, not the radial artery and the radial nerve. It is not by definition a muscle of it is lying on the medial aspect, but it is not a muscle of hypothenar eminences. Not, please note down. It is not a muscle of hypothenar eminences. Palmaris longus muscle, on the other hand, if I talk about palmaris longus muscle, it flexes the hand at the wrist and tightens the palmaris aponeurosis, not along with the palmaris brevis muscle. So the most correct statement is that it is causing wrinkling of the skin of hypothenar eminences. So this statement is absolutely correct about the action of palmaris brevis muscle. Wrinkling the skin of hypothenar eminences and deepening the hollow of the palm. So E option is perfectly correct. So done with this, now let's move on to question number 13. Sternoclavicular joint is. So this is fill in the blank type of MCQ. So sternoclavicular joint is saddle type of synovial joint but functions as a ball and socket type of synovial joint. That means structural and functional aspect. Supplied by which of the following arteries? Thoracoacromial, lateral thoracic, innervated by lateral and pectoral medial pectoral nerves. Articulation between the clavicle and gladulus part of the sternum dislocate easily. So we have got 5 options and you have to choose the most correct statement about sternoclavicular joint. Question number 13. So yes, your time begins now. You will be provided with 15 seconds to mark the correct answer, which is a true statement about sternoclavicular joint. It's a where the sternoclavicular joint should fit in option A, B, C, D or E. So my dear aspirants, I will come up with explanation. The correct answer is A, sternoclavicular joint. If I talk about its structural classification, so structurally it's a type of saddle type of synovial joint. It's a saddle type of synovial joint. And if I talk about its functional classification, functionally, so it becomes a ball and socket type of synovial joint. Ball and socket type of synovial joint. Okay, ball and socket type of synovial joint. Okay, all other options are not true. Let me give you the explanation. Sternoclavicular joint is not a joint which is dislocating quite easily. The most easily dislocated joint is shoulder joint, glenohumeral joint. Sternoclavicular joint is not dislocated so easily. It's a sidal type of articulation joint. Functionally, it is ball and socket type of synovial. This is a statement which I already told you. Structural and functional classification of sternoclavicular joint. It is an articulation between the sternal end of the clavicle and with the manubrium sterni. What was the option provided? Gladulus. What do you mean by the word gladulus? Gladulus word means body of the sternum. So, it is not an articulation between the body of the sternum and the clavicle. It is an articulation between the manubrium sternum, manubrium sternal part, manubri part of the sternal end and not with the body. Okay. Joint, what is the supply? Joint is supplied by, sternoclavicular joint is supplied by internal thoracic artery and suprascapular artery. What is its blood supply? Internal thoracic and suprascapular artery, and not innervated by branches of, so it is not innervated by the lateral and medial pectoral nerve. Okay. So, it is innervated by supraclavicular medial branches and nerve to subclavius. So, this is important that you should know the correct nerve supply and the arterial supply must be known to you. Correct arterial supply is internal thoracic artery, suprascapular artery. Okay. Internal thoracic artery is a branch from the first part of subclavian artery. Suprascapular artery is also a branch of thyrocervical trunk, and thyrocervical trunk is again the branch of first part of subclavian artery. Okay, medial suprascapular nerve and nerve to subclavius. So, see, innervated by lateral medial pectoral nerve is absolutely wrong. Thoracoacromial artery is not involved, lateral thoracic artery is not involved. Okay. We know that it is by the branches from the first part of subclavian artery. Suprascapular artery is mainly giving the blood supply. Articulation with the manubrium sterni, not dislocate easily. So, we have got A as the correct option. So, clearly A option is the correct option. So, done. Let us move on to the next, that is question number 14. All the best here. So, all the best. Let us move on to question number 14. Fracture of scapula typically involves which of the following bony prominences or the parts of the scapula? Acromial process, coracoid process, spine of scapula, inferior angle, suprascapular notch. Fracture of scapula involves which of the following process? 5 options are there and you have to mark the correct answer. Your time begins now. Fracture of scapula typically involves which of the following? The correct answer is acromial process. The correct answer is acromial process. Okay, fracture of scapula is involving which bony prominences? That is the acromial process. Okay. So, actually coracoid process is also strong, spine is also not involved. These other bony prominences which is involved is less commonly involved if you compare with that of the acromial process. So, most commonly fracture of scapula is involving the protruding subcutaneous acromial process. The remainder part of the scapula is not involved, and the reason is that it is well protected. It is well protected by the muscles and thoracic wall itself. Okay. So, yes, let us move on to the next, that is question number 15. A patient cannot raise the trunk as in clamping process. What is most likely the problem with the patient? Patient is not able to raise the trunk as in clamping. What is the most likely the problem? Damage to the ventral rami of C5, C6 and C7, paralysis of latissimus dorsi, injury to dorsal scapular nerve, damage to dorsal rami of C8 and D1, injury to axillary nerve. So, yes, we have got 5 options and you have to give the right answer. Question number 15. A patient cannot raise the trunk as in clamping. What is most likely the problem? 5 options are there. Mark the correct answer. Okay, so your time begins now. Okay, so we have got 5 options and you have to mark the correct answer. So here the clamping process is involved. That means the muscle which is regarded as the clamper or swimmer muscle is involved, and the name of that muscle is latissimus dorsi. My dear aspirants, so this is involving latissimus dorsi muscle. The patient cannot raise the trunk as in clamping. What is most likely? The damage to ventral rami of C5, C6, 7 is not correct. Why? Because the nerve supply of latissimus dorsi is nerve to latissimus dorsi, which is also called as thoracodorsal nerve, and its nerve in a root value is C6, C7 and C8. So B is the correct answer. Injury to dorsal scapular nerve is not the right answer. Dorsal scapular nerve, if it is involved, it is going to involve rhomboidus group of muscle. Damage to dorsal rami is not the correct answer. It's the latissimus dorsi, which is not getting innervation from dorsal rami of C8 and T1. Axillary nerve is not the right answer. What is the reason axillary nerve is not the right answer? We know that axillary nerve is a branch from the posterior cord of brachial plexus, and it is giving innervation to two muscle, deltoid muscle and teres minor muscle. So it is quite clear that the correct answer will be latissimus dorsi. The involvement will be of latissimus dorsi muscle. So B is the correct answer. 15B is the correct answer. Got it? With the paralysis of latissimus dorsi muscle, the patient will not be able to raise the trunk as necessary for clamping. Actually, the action of latissimus dorsi muscle is extension. It is causing extension, it is causing adduction, and it is causing medial rotation of arm. So this is the action of latissimus dorsi muscle: extension, adduction and medial rotation of arm. The reason for involvement and what is the nerve to be involved which will cause paralysis of latissimus dorsi muscle? The nerve being involved is thoracodorsal nerve or nerve to latissimus dorsi. Nerve to latissimus dorsi, root value is C6, C7, C8. It's a branch of posterior cord of brachial plexus. So that is involved. So here the correct answer is B. Done. Let's move on to question number 16. Which of the following is not true in respect to brachialis muscle? Which of the following is not a true statement in respect to brachialis muscle? Its origin is from the distal half of anterior surface of humerus. Its insertion is on the coronoid process and tuberosity of ulna. It flexes the forearm in all the position. It's primarily innervated by musculocutaneous nerve, but some of its lateral part is also getting innervation from radial nerve. It crosses two joints. So we have got 5 options regarding brachialis muscle, and you have to choose the correct answer, which is not a correct statement about brachialis muscle. Okay. Origin, distal half of anterior surface of humerus. Insertion, coronoid process, tuberosity of ulna. So mark the correct answer. Your time begins now. So read all the options and mark the correct answer. 15 seconds will be provided to you. So the correct answer is it crosses the two joint, which is absolutely wrong answer. It is just crossing the one joint, that is elbow joint. So it is not crossing two joint. Okay. So all other option is perfectly correct about brachialis muscle. Let me tell you, its origin is from distal half of anterior surface of humerus is absolutely correct about the origin part of brachialis muscle. The insertion is also occurring on the coronoid process and the tuberosity of ulna, that is also perfectly correct. It flexes the forearm in all the position. So that is also correct. It flexes the forearm in all the position is absolutely correct. And it is primarily innervated by musculocutaneous nerve. So actually brachialis muscle is again an example of, if we talk about brachialis muscle, it is again an example of composite or hybrid muscle. So it's again an example of composite or hybrid muscle. The innervation will be with the musculocutaneous nerve and by the branch of radial nerve. So both are correct. Yes, it is getting innervation from musculocutaneous nerve and also by the radial nerve. It's primarily innervated by musculocutaneous nerve and also by the radial nerve. So D option is perfectly correct. It's also an example of hybrid muscle, composite muscle getting nerve supply, dual nerve supply, but it is crossing a single joint. So E option is not correct. So let me tell you about brachialis muscle. Origin from distal half of anterior surface of humerus. Insertion is coronoid process and the tuberosity of ulna. Just crosses one joint. And brachialis muscle is a strong flexor, so it is flexing the forearm in all the positions. This is most important function of brachialis muscle. And the innervation is, primary innervation is my musculocutaneous nerve, the nerve of the lateral cord of brachial plexus, which is providing innervation to all the muscles of anterior aspect of arm, and its lateral part is innervated by radial nerve. So we have got E as the incorrect option, so E is the correct answer here. So let's move on to the next, that is question number 17. So let's move on to question number 17. Okay, which is derived from radial artery. So we here you can see the following options are provided: dorsal and palmar carpal arteries, common interosseous artery, anterior interosseous artery, posterior interosseous artery, and the ulnar recurrent artery. 5 options are provided, and you have to tell me which of the following artery is not having the source of radial artery. So which is derived from radial artery. So which of the following is a branch of radial artery? This is the question which has been asked. So your 15 seconds starts now. Mark the correct answer. Okay, so which of the following artery is derived from radial artery? The correct answer here will be the palmar, dorsal and palmar carpal arteries. Actually, common interosseous artery, branch of ulnar artery. Now, anterior and posterior interosseous artery, all these are the branch from ulnar artery, and ulnar recurrent artery also a branch from ulnar. Actually, all the options, that is B, C, D, E is an example of ulnar artery. So, only dorsal palmar carpal arteries are the branch from the radial artery. Okay, actually the ulnar artery is giving an important branch, that is common interosseous artery, which is again dividing into anterior and posterior interosseous artery, and this posterior interosseous artery will give you the interosseous recurrent artery. So this is how it happens, and the first option, that is dorsal palmar carpal artery, is not having a source from ulnar artery. The source of these arteries are from radial artery, and we already know that both radial and ulnar artery, so both radial artery and that of ulnar artery. So both radial and ulnar artery, it is the terminal branch of these two arteries, are terminal branches of which artery? Brachial artery. These two arteries are terminal branches of brachial artery. And what is the level where it is given? It is given at the level of neck of, this bifurcation occurs at the level of neck of radius. This bifurcation occurs at the level of neck of radius, and B, C, D, E is the ulnar artery is the source, and only dorsal palmar carpal artery is a branch from radial artery. RA for radial artery. See here. Radial artery is actually giving rise to radial recurrent artery. Not only radial recurrent artery, it also gives rise to dorsal and the palmar carpal arteries. Radial artery is giving rise to radial recurrent artery, it is giving rise to radial recurrent artery, and not only radial recurrent artery, it also provides dorsal and palmar carpal arteries. When we are talking about ulnar artery, it is giving rise to common interosseous artery, it is giving rise to common interosseous artery, it also gives rise to posterior and anterior interosseous arteries, anterior and posterior ulnar recurrent arteries, and that of dorsal and the palmar carpal arteries. So this is the brief of all the important branches of radial and ulnar artery, which is very commonly asked in your competitive NEET PG examination. So this is important for you to revise for the, if you are targeting NEET PG 2022. So got it? Let's move on to question number 18. Deep artery of palm, deep artery of arm accompanies which nerve before passing around the body of humerus? Deep artery of arm is accompanying which nerve before it is passing around the body of humerus? So the options are radial artery, musculocutaneous artery, median artery, okay, and nerve. So it's the nerve, sorry, radial nerve, musculocutaneous nerve, median nerve, ulnar nerve and axillary nerve. So 5 options are provided, the 5 nerves are provided. You have to tell me that which artery is deep artery of arm is lying close to which of the following nerve provided in the options. 5 options are there. Your time starts now. 15 seconds. Mark the correct answer. Okay, so what is the other name of deep artery of arm? Actually, deep artery of arm means it's the profunda brachii artery. It's the profunda brachii artery, and profunda brachii artery is the deep artery of arm, which is a branch of, it's a direct branch of brachial artery, given from the posteromedial aspect, brachial artery. Now, actually both the profunda brachii artery along with the radial nerve is lying very close to, they are lying traversing through the lower triangular space. So, if the profunda brachii artery is involved, that means radial nerve will be involved. That means the correct answer is radial nerve. So, through lower triangular space, lower triangular scapular space, scapular, that is scapular, back of the scapular space, two structures are traversing, two structures are lying very close. So, if deep artery of arm is involved, that is profunda brachii artery, deep artery of arm, it will also involve the radial nerve. It will also involve the radial nerve. Musculocutaneous nerve is not involved because it is not lying in this location. It's a nerve of the anterior aspect of arm. Median nerve is also not involved in this location. It will be involved either in the it is lying close relation with the cubital region, and ulnar nerve is basically also not involved. It will be involved in the medial epicondyle. Axillary nerve is also not involved. It will lie close to that of surgical neck of humerus, and it will be involved in quadrangular space. It will be involved in quadrangular space. Axillary nerve is passing along with close correlation. Axillary nerve is lying in with close correlation with which of the following artery? So, that is also important MCQ question. Axillary nerve lies along with posterior circumflex humeral artery. Posterior circumflex humeral artery. So, it lies close with the posterior circumflex humeral artery, axillary nerve. So, we have got the correct answer as A, that is radial nerve. So, deep artery of arm, my dear aspirants, deep artery of arm. Deep artery of arm accompanies radial nerve through radial groove and passes around the body of humerus. Deep artery of arm, that is called as profunda brachii artery. Deep artery of arm, which is called as profunda brachii artery, it accompanies the radial nerve through radial groove and passes around the body of humerus. So, here the correct option which we have to mark is the deep artery of the arm will be the correct answer. So, that is absolutely correct. Now, let us talk about the next one, that is question number 19. Question number 19. All of the following arteries of the pelvis are branches of internal iliac artery except. All of the following arteries of the pelvis are branches of internal iliac artery except umbilical artery, uterine artery, ovarian artery, vaginal artery. 4 options are there and you have to mark the correct answer. Umbilical artery, uterine, ovarian and vaginal, which is not a branch of internal iliac artery. So, 15 seconds, mark the correct answer. My dear aspirants, the correct answer is ovarian artery. Why ovarian artery is the correct answer? Actually, gonadal artery, in case of males, it's the testicular artery. In case of females, it is the ovarian artery. And these two arteries are the direct branch of abdominal aorta. These two arteries are direct branch of abdominal aorta. This is not a branch of internal iliac artery. Umbilical artery, uterine artery, vaginal artery, all these are the branches of anterior division of internal iliac artery, anterior division of internal iliac artery. Okay, so only C option is the correct answer. Let me show you an image for it where you can clearly appreciate the branches, of internal iliac artery. Now, here you can see this is the abdominal aorta which is dividing into right and the left, common iliac artery. Common iliac artery again divides into external and internal iliac artery. So we are only concentrated. This is the external one, E for external, and this is the internal one. So in this diagram, you can see the branches of internal iliac artery, anterior and posterior division. So we have got 3 branches from the posterior division, that is iliolumbar artery, lateral sacral artery and superior gluteal artery. So these 3 branches which I have highlighted here, these are the 3 branches from the internal iliac artery, but these are the branches from posterior division. These are the branches from posterior division. One, 2 and 3. These 3 branches which I have highlighted is the branches from posterior division of internal iliac artery. Now let's talk about the branches of anterior division. Obliterated umbilical artery, superior vesical artery, obturator artery, vaginal artery or inferior vesical artery, uterine artery or artery to ductus deferens, middle rectal artery, internal pudendal artery, inferior gluteal artery. All these branches which I have highlighted, these are the branches of anterior division of internal iliac artery. These are the branches of anterior division of internal iliac artery. Let's move on to the next. The abdominal aorta, as you can see here, and I just want to show you the branches. Like here you can see this is the ovarian artery, and it is quite evident that the gonadal arteries, both in case of males and females, are direct branches of abdominal aorta. Here also, in brief, before proceeding to the next MCQ, I just want you to show that the direct branches of abdominal aorta. So here you can see the direct branches of abdominal aorta has been marked here. This is the inferior phrenic artery, my dear aspirants. This is the middle suprarenal, superior mesenteric, the renal, the gonadal, the inferior mesenteric, the common iliac artery and the median sacral artery, and we have got 4 pairs of the lumbar artery, 4 pairs of the lumbar artery. So very nicely you can see gonadal arteries branches from the source is abdominal aorta. So all of you do revise the branches of abdominal aorta, internal iliac artery, external iliac artery. All these branches are very commonly asked in your entrance exam. So let's move on to the next, that is question number 20th. Okay, which of the following structure which is labeled here, which is marked here, A for suspensory ligament of ovary, B for ligament of ovary proper, C for processus vaginalis, D for round ligament of uterus. 4 options are there and you have to choose the correct answer. Which of the following structure extends into labia majora? Four options are there, my dear aspirants, and you have to mark the correct answer. Which of the following structure extends into labia majora? Suspensory ligament of ovary proper, processus vaginalis, round ligament of uterus. So my dear aspirants, your time starts now. Mark the correct answer. So the correct answer here is round ligament of uterus. Round ligament of uterus is the correct answer. Okay. So this is one of the support system for the uterus and this is extending till the level of labia majora. Okay. So my dear aspirants, what you can see from the uterus, the source is the uterus, and from the uterus you can see the round ligament of uterus is traversing through deep inguinal ring, inguinal canal, superficial inguinal ring. It's long and then ultimately it will reach till the level of labia majora. So this is the correct answer. All other ligaments which is provided is giving secondary support, but round ligament of uterus is providing primary support to the uterus along with the transverse cervical Mechand-Dot ligaments and also uterosacral ligament, pubocervical ligament. So D is absolutely correct answer for question number 20th. Okay, my dear aspirants, so what I want you to tell before I end this session, what is very important for you to know also is that you should be, so what you can do if you want to study the free sessions on the Unacademy platform, you can join me for the sessions and you can join me perfectly for the sessions in the free platform of Unacademy. So download the Unacademy app, use the code ANAT10. So you can use the code, unlock code ANAT10. And then you can be present for my sessions. Also many of the, in the month of December, the Conquer NEET PG 2022 session is starting. So be the part of that session. This will be highly beneficial for you. So do like, subscribe and download the PDF notes once the session is finished. Actually, download the PDF notes can be provided on the Unacademy app. So you can join me for the free sessions of the special classes on the Unacademy platform. All the best, keep studying. Thank you so much. All the links of the session which I am going to take on the Unacademy platform will be provided there. So you can be present for the session and you can download. The link will be provided in the Telegram group. Let's crack NEET PG together, Unacademy group, and be present for that session. All the best, keep studying. Thank you so much.